Early this summer, I headed to Oklahoma City for a 2-week work trip to design a new boutique hotel. Honestly, I wasn't expecting anything special, just work, evenings in my room, maybe a couple of walks around town to clear my head. But life, as it turned out, had a surprise waiting for me, one I still can't get out of my head. Hey, my dear friends, in this story I'm going to tell you about a trip that flipped my life upside down. Get comfy, pour yourself a cup of tea or coffee, and stick with me till the end. It's gonna be spicy. I swear that my name's Thomas. I'm 30 years old, an interior designer from Dallas. I landed in Oklahoma City late in the evening, beat from a long flight. The city welcomed me with a warm breeze and the soft glow of lights twinkling along the Oklahoma River. The hotel I checked into was this cozy spot with wooden floors, warm lighting, and a view of the riverfront. When I walked up to the front desk to check in, there was this guy behind the counter who caught my attention right away. His name was Christopher, at least, that's what his name tag said. Tall, with short chestnut hair and a smile that made the lobby feel brighter, he seemed like someone who could win anyone over without even trying. "Welcome to our hotel," Christopher said, handing me my room key. "Long trip? Hope you'll find some calm here." His voice was soft, with a slight rasp that made his words feel oddly comforting. I smiled, trying to hide how tired I was, and said the flight was bearable, just happy to finally be here. Christopher nodded like we'd known each other forever and started telling me about the hotel breakfast, nearby diners, and walking paths. Normally, I don't pay much attention to that kind of talk, but something about his vibe, laid back but genuine, made me linger at the desk longer than I needed to. "If you want to know where to eat or what to check out, just let me know," he added, looking right into my eyes. "I'm here every evening." I thanked him and headed to the elevator, but his words stuck with me. Was there something in his gaze, or was I just exhausted? In my room, I tossed my suitcase on the bed and stood by the window, staring at the river glinting in the dark. The loneliness I usually shrugged off felt heavier tonight. I thought about Christopher, his smile, the way he looked at me, and quickly brushed it off. He's just the front desk guy, I told myself, just doing his job. But deep down, something told me this meeting wasn't just chance. The next day, I dove into work, meetings with clients, sketches, discussions. But by evening, when I got back to the hotel, I found myself at the front desk again. Christopher was there, like he'd promised, and his smile greeted me like we were picking up where we left off. We swapped a few words about the weather and my plans for the night, and I noticed he listened closely, tilting his head just a bit. It was a small thing, but it warmed me up. I went to my room, but I already knew I'd find a reason to come down to the lobby tomorrow. Something told me this trip was going to be about more than just work. After that first night in Oklahoma City, I knew this trip was going to be different from any other, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. And I kept busy working on the boutique hotel project, spending my days in endless meetings and drafting designs. But every evening, when I got back to the hotel, I found myself at the front desk, where Christopher greeted me with that same warm smile that somehow made my day feel lighter. Our chats, which started with simple recommendations, slowly turned into something more, and I caught myself looking forward to them with this weird, excited feeling I couldn't explain. On the second evening, I went down to the lobby to ask about a good dinner spot. Christopher was behind the desk, flipping through something on the computer, but when he saw me, he pushed it aside and flashed that smile, like he'd been waiting for me to show up. "So, Thomas, how's your day been?" he asked, leaning on the counter. "Hope Oklahoma City hasn't worn you out yet." I shrugged, trying to play it cool, and said the day was busy but the city seemed interesting, especially with his tips. He laughed, and that sound, light, genuine, made my heart beat just a little faster for some reason. Christopher suggested an Italian place a few blocks from the hotel, explaining how to get there and even mentioning their tiramisu was worth trying. I thanked him, but instead of leaving, I stood there, asking about local bars and parks, even though I really just didn't want the conversation to end. The next evening, it happened again. I got back to the hotel after a long day, and Christopher was there, ready to toss out another idea for my downtime. This time, he recommended walking along the Oklahoma River waterfront, saying it was especially nice at sunset. "If you go, bring a jacket," he added, giving me a sly grin. "Evenings here can get chilly, and you don't strike me as someone who likes being cold." I smiled, feeling his words build this quiet connection between us. We talked about random stuff: the weather, the time he got stuck in the hotel elevator, my thoughts on local coffee shops. But behind those simple chats, I started noticing things. The way he tilted his head slightly when he listened, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he cared about. They were small details, but they stuck with me when I went back to my room. By the end of the first week, I couldn't deny I was looking forward to these moments. Every evening, I'd come up with some excuse to head to the lobby, to ask about a route, check breakfast hours, or just chat about how the day went. Christopher was always there, and his presence became this calming, almost essential part of my routine. One night, he mentioned he loved old movies, and we spent 20 minutes debating which director was better. I noticed he looked at me a little longer than necessary, and it made my chest tighten with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what was going on with me. He's just a friendly guy, I told myself, just a front desk clerk doing his job well. But deep down, I knew it was more than just liking his charm. I felt like every conversation was pulling us closer to something I both wanted and feared. And with every evening, that feeling only grew stronger. By the start of my second week in Oklahoma City, I couldn't keep pretending my evening trips to the front desk were just random. And even though the boutique hotel project was in full swing, my thoughts kept drifting back to Christopher. His smile, his steady gaze, the way he could turn a simple chat into something special, it had become a part of my day I didn't want to go without. Our talks were getting longer, more personal, and I could feel something growing between us, something I wasn't quite ready to name. That evening, I headed to the lobby later than usual after a draining day of meetings. Christopher was behind the desk as always, but the usual bustle around him was gone, leaving things quiet. He looked at me, and his smile felt a little softer than usual, almost private. "You're late tonight, Thomas," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Thought you'd be resting after a day like that." I shrugged, trying to hide how his voice made my heart race, and said I couldn't sleep, so I figured I'd come down and talk. He nodded, like that was the most natural reason in the world, and suggested I sit on the couch in the corner of the lobby, where it was cozier. I agreed, feeling a nervous buzz building inside me. We started talking about small stuff, how I was settling into the city, his favorite spots in Oklahoma City. But soon, the conversation took a deeper turn. Christopher opened up about moving here from Kansas a couple of years ago, leaving a job at a small family shop to find something that felt like his own. His voice got quieter as he talked about how hard it was to start over, but how the city gave him a sense of freedom. I listened, not taking my eyes off him, and suddenly felt this urge to share something of my own. I told him about my life in Dallas, how being a designer had taken over everything, leaving little room for anything real. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just running in circles," I admitted, staring at my hands. "Doing projects, meeting people, but still feeling alone." Christopher looked at me like he could see right through me. "You know, I've felt that too," he said softly, leaning a bit closer. "But then someone comes along and reminds you you're not alone." His words hung in the air, and I felt something shift between us. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to pause. I noticed his hand, resting on the armrest, was so close to mine I could feel the warmth of his skin. My heart was pounding, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I slowly reached out, and our fingers brushed, a tiny movement, but it felt like a spark. Christopher didn't move back. His gaze deepened, and I knew he felt it too. We sat like that for a few seconds, not saying a word, but the silence said more than words ever could. His thumb gently traced over my hand, and it felt so natural, so right, that I forgot all my doubts. I leaned in a little closer, and he did the same, our faces so near I could feel his breath. It wasn't a kiss, but the moment was so intimate it sent warmth spreading through my whole body. "Thomas," he whispered, his voice so soft it nearly undid me. "I'm glad you're here." I smiled, feeling his words settle deep inside me. We pulled back, but his hand stayed close to mine, and I knew that evening had changed everything. Lying in bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about how his touch made me feel alive. And I knew I wanted that feeling to last as long as it could. By the middle of my trip in Oklahoma City, I couldn't keep denying that Christopher had become more than just a friendly face. And even though the boutique hotel project was still my main focus, every evening I found myself heading back to the hotel with one thought: seeing him. After our last talk, when his hand brushed mine, I couldn't stop replaying how close we'd been, how his gaze made me forget everything else. I knew it was risky, but the feeling was too strong to ignore. That evening, I went down to the lobby, a familiar buzz of anticipation humming inside me. Christopher was behind the desk, but when he saw me, his face lit up with that smile that turned my insides upside down. "Thomas, you're early tonight," he said, stepping away from the computer. "Done with work already? Or just missing my stellar recommendations?" I laughed, trying to hide how his words sent my heart racing, and said it was probably a bit of both. We chatted about my day, about how I'd tried the coffee at the cafe he'd suggested. But then he looked at me with this new expression, like he was weighing whether to say something. "Listen," he started, lowering his voice. "There's this place I want to show you. A little beach by the river, hardly anyone goes there. If you're not too wiped out, we could head there tomorrow night." I froze, feeling his offer hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It wasn't just a casual invite, and we both knew it. I nodded, saying it sounded great, though inside I was wrestling with excitement and nerves. Christopher smiled, and something in his eyes made my breath catch. The next evening, I waited for him outside the hotel, my nerves strung tight like guitar strings. Christopher came out in jeans and a light jacket, and I couldn't help noticing how he looked out of his uniform, relaxed, real. We got into his car, and as we drove to the river, he told stories about local legends, but I barely heard him, too caught up in how his hands sometimes brushed close to mine on the gearshift. When we reached the beach, night had settled in, and the stars were shining above us. The sand felt cool under my feet, and the river lapped softly nearby. We sat on an old blanket Christopher had brought, talking about life, dreams, the things that scare us. But the words started to fade, and I could feel the air between us thickening. Christopher turned to me, his face so close I could see every feature in the moonlight. "Thomas," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper, "I can't stop thinking about you." I didn't have a chance to reply because he leaned in and gently pressed his lips to mine. It was a soft, almost hesitant kiss, but it sparked something in me I couldn't hold back. I kissed him back, pulling him closer, and our kiss deepened, full of everything we'd both been holding in for too long. His hands slid over my shoulders, and I felt the warmth of his body as we pressed against each other. It wasn't just physical. Every move, every breath carried something deeper, a connection we both felt. We pulled back, breathing hard, but his hands stayed on the back of my neck, my fingers still resting on his chest. "This is crazy," I whispered, my voice shaky with joy. "Maybe," he said, smiling. "But I don't want it to stop." We sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, under the stars, and I knew this moment would stay with me forever. Lying in bed that night, I could still feel his warmth lingering in me, and I realized I was ready to follow this feeling wherever it took me. After that evening on the beach, I knew I couldn't go back to being the person I was before meeting Christopher. And though my trip to Oklahoma City was supposed to be all about work, every moment with him was turning my world upside down. Our kiss under the stars felt like a door we'd opened together, and I didn't want to close it. I could sense we were on the edge of something bigger, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. We stayed on that secluded beach, the river lapping softly nearby, the stars shining above us like they were cheering us on. Christopher sat close, his shoulder brushing mine, and the warmth of his body was so real it drowned out everything else. We didn't speak, but the silence was heavy with meaning, like words weren't necessary anymore. I turned to him, and his eyes, lit by the moonlight, looked at me with such tenderness that my heart tightened. "Thomas," he said quietly, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know what this is, but I don't want it to end." I didn't answer with words, I just leaned in and kissed him again. This time, the kiss wasn't as hesitant as the first, it was deep, full of the desire we'd both stopped holding back. His lips were warm, soft, and I felt his arms wrap around me, pulling me closer. My fingers slid down his back, feeling the heat of his skin through the thin fabric of his shirt. We pressed against each other, and every breath, every movement felt like a promise we were making without speaking. I pulled back for a moment to catch my breath, but his hand gently touched my face, keeping me close. "You make me feel alive," he whispered, his thumb softly tracing my cheek. I smiled, his words sinking deep into my core. We kissed again, and this time there was something almost desperate in how we held onto each other, like we were afraid the moment might slip away. His hands slipped under my jacket, and I felt the gentle pressure of his fingers on my waist, so simple yet so intimate that my body warmed in response. I pulled him closer, my lips brushing his neck, and I heard his quiet exhale, his breathing uneven. We lay down on the blanket, still holding each other, and I could feel his heartbeat against mine. It wasn't about anything physical in a crude way, it was about closeness, about sharing something that words couldn't capture. His fingers laced with mine, and we stayed like that, staring at the stars as the night grew deeper. "What do we do now?" I asked softly, my voice barely audible over the sound of the river. Christopher turned to me, his face so close I could see every detail. "I don't know," he said, his voice gentle but sure. "But I want to be with you, Thomas, whatever that looks like." I nodded, his words giving me courage. We lay there a while longer, wrapped in each other's arms, and I knew this moment, his warmth, his breath, his presence, would stay with me forever. Back at the hotel that night, I couldn't sleep, still feeling his touch lingering on my skin. I realized I was ready to risk everything to hold onto this feeling, even if I didn't know what lay ahead. The morning after that night on the beach felt like waking up in a different world. And I lay in my hotel bed, still feeling Christopher's warmth, his breath, his touches that seemed etched into my skin. Our evening under the stars, filled with deep kisses and tender closeness, had changed everything. I couldn't stop thinking about how his arms held me, how his lips met mine, and how we teetered on the edge without crossing it, though we both knew we were ready. It was more than just attraction, it was a connection that scared me with its intensity, but one I couldn't bear to lose. I got out of bed and walked to the window, staring at the Oklahoma River glinting in the morning sun. My thoughts were a mess. I knew my life in Dallas, my job, my routines, none of it fit with what was happening here. But the idea of leaving and walking away from Christopher felt unbearable. I decided I needed to talk to him, to figure out what we both felt and where this could go. That day, I got back to the hotel earlier than usual, my heart beating faster with anticipation. Christopher was at the front desk, and when he saw me, his smile was soft, but I could see the same nervous excitement in his eyes that I felt. "Thomas, you're early today," he said, his voice a little quieter than usual. "Couldn't wait to see me again, huh?" I grinned, feeling his words ease my tension, and said he might be onto something. He asked me to wait until his shift ended, and we headed to the hotel's small lounge, where it was quiet and cozy. We sat on a couch in the corner, and I felt his knee brush against mine, sending a wave of warmth through me. We started talking about last night, about how everything had felt so natural but so powerful. "I didn't expect it to be like this," Christopher said, looking into my eyes. "But I don't regret a thing, Thomas. You make me want more." His words were like a spark, and I couldn't hold back. I leaned in, and our lips met in a kiss deeper than the one on the beach, full of desire we weren't trying to hide anymore. His hands slid down my back, pulling me closer, and I felt his fingers gently grip my shoulders, sending a shiver through me. My hands found his waist, and I pulled him so close I could feel the heat of his body through his shirt. Our kisses slowed but grew more intense, and I felt his lips trail to my neck, drawing a quiet gasp I couldn't hold in. We pulled back for a moment, but his hands stayed on the back of my neck, mine on his chest, feeling his heartbeat under my fingers. "This is too much," I whispered, but my voice was thick with joy. "I don't know how to stop." "Then don't," he said, his voice rough with emotion. We pressed against each other again, and his hands slipped under my shirt, touching my skin with such tenderness I could hardly breathe. My fingers traced his back, and we were so close it felt like one more step would take us over the edge. But we paused, breathing heavily, holding on to each other, knowing this moment was about more than just physical need. "What are we doing, Chris?" I asked, my lips still close to his. We're living, he said, smiling. And I want to keep living like this with you. We sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, and I knew this talk had only solidified what I felt. Back in my room that night, I realized I was ready to fight for this, even if it meant appending everything I'd known. The final days of my trip to Oklahoma City were a mix of pure joy and growing unease. And after that night on the beach and our talk in the hotel lounge, I felt like Christopher had become a part of me I wasn't ready to let go. Every look he gave me, every touch, every kiss we shared left a mark I could still feel when I was alone. But with each passing day, I became more aware that my departure was getting closer, and that fact hung over us like a cloud we tried our best to ignore. I spent as much time with Christopher as I could. After his shifts, we'd walk along the Oklahoma River waterfront, holding hands when no one was around. We talked about silly things, like how he once tried to cook pasta and nearly burned down his kitchen, or my childhood dreams of becoming an architect. But beneath those light conversations, the depth of our feelings was always there. One evening, we stopped by the river, and he wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. Ever think about how one person can change everything? He asked, his voice soft but serious. I turned to look into his eyes and said I never believed in that kind of thing until I met him. He smiled, and we kissed, standing by the water under the gentle glow of streetlights. The kiss was slow, tender, but it carried the weight of our looming goodbye. His arms circled my waist, and I pressed myself against him, feeling the warmth of his body that had become so familiar. We didn't talk about me leaving, but I knew he was thinking about it just as much as I was. The next evening, we found a quiet cafe downtown. Sitting at a small table, we shared a dessert, and his leg brushed against mine under the table, sending a shiver through me. Thomas, he said, looking at me over his coffee cup. I don't want this to end when you leave. We can figure something out, right? I nodded, but inside, hope and fear were battling it out. I told him about my life in Dallas, how it consumed me, but added that for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a reason to change things. He reached across the table, and his fingers laced with mine. That simple gesture felt so intimate it made my heart ache. I want that too, he said quietly. But I'm scared distance will make it harder. We sat in silence, holding hands, and I realized I didn't want to lose him, even if it would be tough. Later, when we got back to the hotel, he walked me to the elevator. In the empty hallway, he pulled me close, and we kissed again, his hands sliding down my back, my fingers tangling in his hair. It was desperate, almost painful, because we both knew time was slipping away. Stay with me a little longer, he whispered, his lips so close to mine. I wanted to say yes, but instead I just held him, feeling his heartbeat against mine. We stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, until the elevator dinged, reminding us it was time to go. Back in my room, I lay in bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I thought about Christopher, how he'd changed me, and how I had to find a way to hold on to this, no matter the obstacles. My departure was inevitable, but I knew I wasn't ready to say goodbye. My last day in Oklahoma City came too fast, and I felt time slipping away like sand through my fingers. And these 2 weeks had changed me in ways I never expected. Christopher wasn't just a part of this trip. He was the reason I started questioning my life, what I really wanted. Our walks, our kisses, our moments of closeness under the stars and in quiet hotel corners, it was all like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. But the reality of my departure loomed over us, and we had to figure out what came next. That morning, I packed my bags, but my heart was somewhere else. I went down to the lobby, knowing Christopher would be at the desk. When I saw him, he smiled, but there was the same hint of sadness in his eyes that I felt. Last day, huh? He said, trying to sound casual, but his voice wavered. I nodded, a lump in my throat. We agreed to meet after his shift to spend my final hours together. That evening, we walked to our favorite spot along the Oklahoma River waterfront. The sky was painted in pinks and oranges from the sunset, and we held hands, not caring who might see. We stopped by the water, and I turned to him. Chris, I don't know how this is gonna work. I started, my words heavy but honest. Dallas, the distance, my job. It all feels so complicated. but I know I don't want to lose you. He looked at me, his eyes shimmering in the sunset light. Thomas, I don't want that either, he said softly. We can call, text, visit each other. It won't be easy, but I'm willing to try if you are. His words sparked hope in me and I pulled him close. Our lips met in a kiss, soft but full of promise. His arms wrapped around my waist, my fingers tangled in his hair, and for a moment, I forgot about time, distance, the future. We pressed against each other, and I felt the warmth of his body, so familiar now. This moment was ours, and I knew it would stay with me, no matter where I went. We sat on a bench, still holding hands, and talked about how we'd stay in touch. He suggested coming to Dallas in a month, and I promised to return to Oklahoma City as soon as I could. We laughed, made plans, but deep down, I knew the future was uncertain. Yet that uncertainty didn't scare me anymore. It felt like possibility. You know, Christopher said, gazing at the river, you made me believe this stuff is real. Love that comes out of nowhere and changes everything. Do you believe in it, Thomas? I smiled and squeezed his hand. I do now, I said. Because of you. When it was time to say goodbye, we stood outside the hotel, holding each other. His final kiss was tender but strong, and I carried it with me as I got into the taxi to the airport. Sitting on the plane, staring out the window, my heart was full of hope. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I was ready to fight for it. So, friends, I've got a question for you. Do you believe in love that can survive distance? Have you ever had a moment where one encounter changed your life? What would you do in my shoes? Would you risk everything for a feeling like this, or let it stay in the past? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I really want to hear them. This story isn't just mine. It's about all of us searching for something real.